Welcome aboard! We will be your guides during this magical journey into the movies. It's the perfect job for us because we love the movies. It's showtime! Ready when you are, CB!
Action!
Welcome to Monoreel Radio, episode number 364. I'm Sean.
Greetings, programs. I'm Jackie.
We are here to discuss Tron Ares, the third installment of the Tron series. I know I am a big fan of the Tron series. You are a big fan of the Tron series. Tron is so interesting because it has gotten better over time because technology has caught up with the tech that they talked about in the first movie, but it's still this incredibly niche market, right?
Right, because they keep having to test it out first before they commit to doing the movies. They for Legacy and for this one, they will test it out at Comic-Con before they actually greenlight the project, which is sort of mind-boggling. But before we get into that, I want to sort of reset our Tron fandom a little bit, because we had I remember specifically we were anticipating reviewing Tron and Tron Legacy in conjunction with the opening of the ride, and it took so long for them to open the ride, which let us remind everyone they had already built once before. We ended up doing it in celebration of the 40th anniversary of the first one. So for me personally, with the original Tron, I think I'm more fascinated by the production of it than I am in love with the story itself, because we had kind of said it's a very simple story. It's a story about redemption because an idea was stolen and you want the credit for it. But because it's so elevated through the production and because they got such great actors and because they were pulling other genres like sci-fi and war movies, it just feels like such a big entity. And it took the general public a while to get on board with that. And then by the time they do Legacy, they had done, I think it was a 3-minute either featurette or, it was basically a modern day proof of concept with what they were going to do for Legacy.
It was the light cycles.
Yes, but modernized from the 80s 8-bit. And they tested it out at a Comic-Con. The crowd goes freaking nuts. And then they decided to finally commit to the project. At the time, I think it was 40 years later, and they brought everybody back.
Close, about 30
close,
years.
yeah.
About 30 years, yeah.
Was it only 30?
Right. Well, yeah, because if we did,
it's 40 now.
Yes. Yeah, it was about 30 years later.
Yes.
Which I think, I understand you need tech to catch up.
Mm-hmm.
With where you want to be when you make these movies. But I think that's a part of a bigger conversation it is a very niche market, like I said before, and sometimes you have to wonder, is part of that part and parcel because they've waited so long in between movies to do these sequels?
Right, and you were sort of playing with fire at that point because the original cast is sort of aging up, but they got almost everybody back, at least everybody that lived through the first Tron. They got Steven Lisberger back as a producer. They punched it up with, to your point, the tech and the light cycles. They get Daft Punk to do the soundtrack. So people were so excited for it, and they delivered a really great Tron movie. And, now you have this added layer of more of a human element because it's not just avatars. This is a father and son story.
Right.
So I remember, to bring this full circle, when you and I saw the Ares trailer, we were kind of we were excited, for sure. But how does this change now that we're not going in and we're bringing it out into the real world? And I think we were sort of cautiously optimistic at best.
I had said that, to me, the best thing about Tron is the grid. Putting you in the grid, that is Tron, right? So understanding that technology is ever-changing and 3D printing is a thing and AI is a thing. You know, making it modern for a modern audience, and you're trying to make a movie that will remain timeless, right? So the original Tron movie, while ahead of its time then, is very timeless now. Whether the kids like the special effects or not, or, you know, that's a different story. But AI 3D printing, that is now something that you can watch this movie 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now, and it's timeless. So, did they accomplish their goal of making a timeless film? And did they make the right decision taking us out of the grid? That, on top of many other things, is what we are here to discuss today.
This episode is sponsored by Where in the Park. Our friends at Where in the Park make seek and find card games designed to play in the theme parks and turn your day into an interactive adventure. Game packs come with a deck of cards, each with an image on it that's hidden somewhere in the theming of the park, helping you to discover details that you've probably walked past 100 times. Where in the Park game packs will spark curiosity, encourage connection, and make every visit to the parks even more memorable. Visit monoreelradio.com and click on our affiliate link to purchase your game packs at a discount.
The Kim sisters are running NCOM while Julian Dillinger has taken over Dillinger Systems from his grandfather. Both companies are working to find a breakthrough with AI and digital construction. However, NCOM is dealt a blow when Tess Kim dies of cancer. Dillinger develops a program named Ares, who is a security software meant to protect the grid as master control. Eve Kim and her assistant Seth visit a remote lab in Alaska set up by Kevin Flynn. There she sees that her sister left a video message for her, encouraging her to continue looking for the permanence code that both NCOM and Dillinger Systems have been longing for in order to find success in their digital construction, because currently nothing that they build can sustain longer than 29 minutes. Julian shows his board and his investors what the tech can do and brings Ares to life using laser-guided 3D printing, but leaves out the 29-minute detail to the dismay of his mother, who finds his demeanor deceitful to his investors. Julian continues to try to find the permanence code, as he believes that this will control the future and will do so by any means necessary to save his job and his family's legacy. Later on, while in the lab in Alaska, Eve finds a double helix permanent code that Flynn had left behind on a floppy disk, and upon testing sees that it works. Meanwhile, on the grid, Ares begins to feel things and think for himself as he evolves, including the pain of being viewed as expendable software. Dillinger hacks into NCOM's server as he believes that Eve is close to a breakthrough, and shuts their server down during a major launch of their new video game, Space Paranoids. Ares extracts the file that Dillinger needs and sees that one of his fellow programs was destroyed when Dillinger found it to be broken. Dillinger instructs Ares to locate Eve Kim, who is en route to NCOM with the code on a hard drive. Ares, meanwhile, looks through Eve's files and learns of Tess's death and how close the sisters were. He also finds the lab in Alaska and that she cracked the code for permanence, which Dillinger also sees. Dillinger creates and sends Ares and Athena, another program, to retrieve Eve Kim. After a lengthy chase, Ares corners Eve, who destroys the hard drive before she sees that Ares is in fact a program that is timing out. She is then transported by laser to Dillinger's grid. On the grid, Dillinger instructs Ares to extract the code from Eve Kim and then delete the user, killing her and deleting her existence altogether, which Ares does not wish to do. Ares dismisses Athena, who warns Dillinger of Ares' malfunction, so Dillinger tells her to delete Ares and Kim. They escape through a transfer portal and return to the real world, as Ares now has feelings and has evolved into wishing to be made permanent and away from Dillinger and his evil intent. With the clock ticking, as Ares will only live for 29 more minutes, Eve races to NCOM with Ares, where Seth uses a particle laser to send Ares into Flynn's legacy grid to search for the permanence code. Athena, meanwhile, attacks NCOM and destroys the particle laser to try and trap Ares from re-resolution into the real world, trapping him in the legacy grid. Athena becomes power-hungry and starts to go above her orders from Dillinger as she, too, is starting to evolve and think for herself. Dillinger's mother, upset by his radicalism and recklessness, decides to strip him of his title and shut down the Permanence Project, but is killed by Athena, who now wants permanence for herself because that is now her mission. In the Legacy grid, Ares meets Flynn, who is intrigued by a program who wants to be real. Flynn gives him the code and sends him back using a laser in his old home lab. Meanwhile, Seth and another associate from NCOM, AJ, hack the Dillinger system to take it down, and they end Athena's attack. In the meantime, Dillinger, knowing that the police are after him, use one of his particle lasers to digitize himself to escape and put himself onto his grid. Ares, now permanent, has decided to live in the real world, and NCOM takes off under Eve Kim's leadership. They thrive, and Ares begins to live his life, learning more and more about what it is like to be human in the real world.
Well, I think that plot tells us a lot about the differences of a film where we're now coming out of the grid instead of going into it, because this is by far the most convoluted one.
See, and I think it's the easiest one to follow.
I mean, yes, it is, but on paper, that sounded like a lot.
Well, it is. I mean, it's Tron. It's not going to be something that isn't very, very deeply layered for a multitude of reasons, between the tech, between the motivation, man versus man versus himself. These are all things that are sort of hallmarks of the Tron franchise, right? But let's get into what we have here.
Well, okay. See, I'm glad you bring up the hallmarks of the Tron franchise, because that is something it took like my fifth viewing of this, because I did more than just the two that we normally do to prep for an episode. Obviously, we had seen it in theaters. Something was just bumping me the entire time, and I could not figure it out. And then I watched Tron. I watched Tron Legacy, and it finally clicked in my brain. The hallmarks of it, I think a lot of this has to do with having Steven Lisberger at the helm, which he's still a producer on this film, but he's very much in a consulting role. He's not nearly as hands-on as he was with obviously Tron and then Tron Legacy. But aside from removing the person who's been at the head of the creative the entire time, there's a lot of elements that went with him. And, you know, obviously we have to evolve this movie with the times because it is so tech heavy. But what I bump on the most is the way that this is shot. Because when you look at the camera moves of Tron and even Tron Legacy, they're so directional. They follow the grid pattern. You don't get a lot of zooms. I don't think you get any in Tron, actually. Legacy, you might have a few. But if you need a close-up of something, it's a close-up. You're not zooming into it. You punch into it. All of the camera moves are either a tracking shot or a dolly shot. So the camera moves from left to right and back and forth. This is kind of hard to explain without a visual, so I'm hoping that this makes sense. We're about to test how effective a communicator I am. But basically, so the way that a camera moves, you're either moving the head of it, the lens, you're doing an in-camera move like a zoom in and out, or you're moving the body of the camera. So in the first two films, it's all body moves. That's what I mean by the front and back and the side to side, not actually the head of the camera. And here, granted, it is a different director. It was Joachim Roning, who we know from all of our favorite sequels. He's done Maleficent 2. He has done Pirates of the Caribbean 5. And he's also done Young Girl in the Sea. And now this. So talk about a range. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, because here I think he took so much creative license with Tron, and he's like, I've got this cool IP and I'm going to punch it up. To circle it back around to the point I'm making, those camera moves don't feel like Tron. This feels like an action movie. And it's going to feel that way regardless, because we're bringing them out of the grid and into the real world. But because you didn't keep the constant of these camera moves, and now you're doing more like spins with the camera, you definitely have some zooms there. It took forever, but it was the cinematography and the direction that I was bumping on. And that's what makes this feel the least like a Tron movie, besides the obvious.
Does it make sense? I'll ask you this question and then we'll get into reviewing the actual film. Does it make sense for it to take this shift because we're no longer exclusive on the grid? So it doesn't need to feel like a side shooter. It doesn't need to feel like a video game now.
And I think that was the intent behind it. But what you've done is make this feel like a martial arts movie and not a Tron movie. And I think if you had just kept to those conventions, that was something that was such a mantra of the production team when they made Legacy. It was, what tech did we have in the 80s and how do we stick within those confines? And they tried to do everything as practically as they could with building the set and the backlighting. And that's why it still felt like a Tron movie, just that the world had grown within the grid because it had been left alone for so long. And that's the thing. It's tricky here because you're coming out. So you do have the creative freedom to make these stylistic choices, but I do feel like it took on an entirely different tone. And I wish they had stuck with those things, because then it still would have felt more like a Tron movie. So anyway, we'll talk about what does feel like a Tron movie. This intro with the Red Castle all lit up knocked it out of the park. I loved when they did it the first time with Legacy, but this looked really stinking cool with the red.
Yeah, this looked great. And I'll be honest with you, I don't mind this catch-up montage that we have to start the movie. It's so you're sort of in a tricky situation because, like I said, you have spent so much time in between films that you have to assume that somebody who's seeing Tron Ares has never seen Tron before. This could be something where a parent who grew up with the original Tron, saw Tron Legacy in their 20s or their 30s, are now bringing their children who may have seen it once on Disney Plus, if they saw it at all. Let's call it what it is, because the special effects are over 40 years old, and because the kids have that, 5.5-inch device in their pocket that can just take them out of everything. They may have watched part of it, got bored, started screwing around on their phone. You have to assume they know nothing about Tron. So you're going to crash course us. For all of those reasons, I'm okay with it. And the thing is, because you're going to focus so much on the action of the film, you don't have a lot of time to introduce us to the Kim sisters and why any of this matters. So I didn't mind it. But part of the problem is we don't know who the Kim sisters are, why they are co-running the company, or why it matters. Flynn Sr. is in the grid. Young Flynn is off the grid, doesn't want to do the company anymore, never really wanted to be a part of his father's company. That we knew from Legacy. I don't know how else you would have done this, where you would have introduced us to them, where it makes sense.
Here's the thing. I think the media blitz in general is very overdone. And that just might be my personal take on it, because admittedly, it is such a device that we lean on in reality television. I can't even tell you how many headlines I have pulled, how many that I've made up. So I just kind of like rolled my eyes when I saw that. especially because they've also done this in Legacy as a catch-up. So I can look the other way in the sense of you have decades to catch us up on and you need to do it quickly. But because you've already done this in Legacy, I feel like we could have been a bit more creative or a bit more careful with it. Like, I would have been fine if they did something like this, but because you've got this big con for the video game launch, why not do like a company highlight reel? Especially because one of the reasons they had to do it this way is because Tess is not at her own, Eve is not at her own launch. She's trying to fulfill Tess's last or her life's work, basically.
Right.
So because she's not there, you know, and I kind of like that they did that where they were built like, what's more important than this right now? Well, she is doing something more important and she beat Dillinger to it, which is also very important. I like how we're establishing our characters now, but I think just as far as the reset, especially because they need to stall for Eve, you could have played out the company highlight reel and taken the little digs of you beat Dillinger at his own game here, and like you could have thrown the shade at Dillinger, all channeled through that highlight reel. What I really don't like about it is the throwaway line, to your point, of where is Sam Flynn now? He didn't, he stepped down due to quote unquote personal reasons when his entire arc in Legacy was learning to understand what happened to his dad, not treating him like a deadbeat dad, appreciating what his father did because he got to experience it firsthand. And then Flynn essentially gives his life to save his son because he does get de-rezzed at the end of Legacy. What we see now is, you know, this ethereal being, which we'll get into. But that was such a huge character arc. If you couldn't get the actor back for this movie, like, we need a little bit more than that. Another thing that really breaks the continuity is that Dillinger's son was in the boardroom in Legacy. I'm fine. You know, I'm not saying that you only had one kid, but we never addressed the son. And now all of a sudden we have the daughter that they say was at the helm. Actually, Eris says it later. It's pretty funny. A pretty unremarkable time in the company history. So there are things that they just, pardon the pun, blitzed over.
I do love, though, watching Dillinger build Ares. I love the coding. I love the patching. And a part of that is because in the second half of my life here, I am studying to kind of get into that realm. I'm ready for a career. I've had a job for a long time, but I'm ready for that career, right? So for me, watching it play out and seeing how smart it is that they're taking something that's practical, they're taking tech that gets used every single day to build programs, to build software, to do, you know, analysis, and to see it used practically, specifically to watch the actual, I mean, that's what Tron is, right? Like, we know that these are programs that come to life through coding, but to see Ares actually be born, to see him be broken, to see him be fixed, to see him evolve, to see how he communicates back to you like a chat GPT, right? Watching all of it play out practically, I thought was fantastic.
I do too. And I love how it's juxtaposed against this big high-tech warehouse. And Eve is working off the grid. No pun intended there. You know, she's totally remote. The only thing that I don't love is how have Tess's computers survived in this little building where snow is coming in. Like, how are these computers not destroyed especially because they're older. They're DOS computers. You're putting floppy disks on them to try and find the permanence code that Flynn left in there. But that's a little jarring, but I will look the other way because I just love how it's cut against they're growing an orange tree, which is such a great callback to the first Tron because the first thing that they transport is an orange. And I think that's also a little wink and a nod to Disney and building the parks in the orange groves. So I love that we have that Easter egg in there, and they're growing it in the middle of nowhere, which kind of, I can also forgive the snow for that because you don't need to grow a real tree. You're bringing this tree in from the grid and seeing if it will last more than a half hour. That's something that we were very critical of in Legacy, where you had 8 hours to escape the grid, and we were like, that seems awfully convenient. But I love that they are working in the confines of a half hour, just under a half hour. And I love how that it's revealed. The first time that they bring Ares out and use it as this demo in Dillinger's presentation, Evan Peters in this scene is so incredible. Like, we're going to talk about the cast, obviously, but I think it's worth noting now because the tech is so flashy that his speech doesn't need to be as he's presenting to the board. And it's such a layered performance because his delivery is so confident because he knows what he's got without having to be like sales pitchy about it. And it's even more layered because you kind of know that he's not telling them everything. The whole thing is just brilliant. And I love how it's cut against what Eve is trying to do for altruistic reasons.
Well, and that's the thing, right? For the warts that may have existed in that news media montage get you caught up, in this moment where you have Eve and Seth in Alaska and you've got Dillinger deceiving the military and his board and his investors, it's a really phenomenal introduction for who these characters are. And to your point, how one is acting altruistically and the other one is just acting deceitfully. You know exactly who they are. You know exactly how they are adversaries. Like, that much worked for sure.
I also love, we know that Tess was doing this for altruistic reasons, but Eve is sort of hesitant when it comes to this tech. So she's still trying to fulfill her sister's last wish, but she doesn't know if she can trust it.
Yeah.
She doesn't even know if she can trust herself with it, which I really, really like. I also like that once we bring Eris out, we start to see, like, they plant it so early that he wants more. When he starts to feel the rain, but he can't quite even describe what a feeling is. And then we see the humor peppered in there of, I hope you bought your umbrellas. It's really, really great, which is why I love that they slam you right away with, this is only going to last for 29 minutes. That's the most that they've done. And that's why this permanence code is so important.
So after we get through this and we realize what's happening, you have NCOM is doing the big launch for Space Paranoids. They're trying to figure out where Eve Kim is. She's completely off the grid. She's not telling them what's happening. All the while, Dillinger hacks into the server farm at NCOM. I love that we watch this happen. I love that we go into the grid.
Yep.
I love that we go into the servers and that they took the programs and they basically turned them into soldiers. We've seen Tron as a video game,
yep.
right? Like, we've seen that. But to see it play out as virus and antivirus,
yep.
This was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, the visual representation of a hack was so smart, especially because you do need something more exciting than Man in the Chair and just watching Dillinger type. What also blows my mind is that, you know, Dillinger, senior, at one point was the head of NCOM. And the first time we see him, the helicopter is red in Tron Legacy. And this was after he stole Flynn's program. So now we've completely, red still very much represents the bad guy, although not necessarily with Eris, but like we've brought that full circle to now NCOM is being invaded by the red virus. Like the visuals are absolutely wild in this opening sequence.
And the fact that they call Dillinger on it and he's just kind of like, meh, he doesn't care. He's not denying it, but he's not admitting it, but he is admitting it. Yeah, everything about this is great. And then peppered in is the comedy. When they're on the private jet flying back, they're making champagne. Seth
Out of the
Seth looks at the flight attendant who he's definitely crushing on, and he takes the champagne and makes it into mimosas and says, I made that orange. Long story. Like, he was... Seth is a character, and we'll talk about the cast later, but bringing him in as the quirky comedy, like, it worked. He was absolutely perfect. And you tend to have those types in the sci-fi movies that sort of act as the comic relief.
Or like a Riley Poole in National Treasure.
I like the fact that they didn't make him that, though. I like the fact that he's not awkward.
Yeah.
Riley is awkward. Even taking it out of Disney and looking at something like Galaxy Quest, which is very much a parody. It is a comedy, but it's comedy meets action meets sci-fi, and it's fish out of water, and you have Justin Long in that film acting as the superfan that's guiding the actors through what to do. But it's Justin Long playing Justin Long. And he's so much more talented than that, but early in his career, that's just what he played. I like that they didn't go that route with Seth.
No, and when you really think about it, we've not seen this type of humor throughout the franchise yet. Even the sarcasm or the literalness of Ares, we haven't really seen it. They tried to get some humor in there through Cora, I think, in Legacy, because she's so childlike and innocent, but it was like unintentional humor, like with the Jules Verne thing.
Yeah.
And they're talking about a book, and she means, have you read it? And she asks Sam, did you know him? As if he would know him personally.
Right.
But that's like the most that you get. This is probably the funniest of the bunch. The only thing that I bump on a little bit with this, they're shooting in Vancouver. They shot on location over about 6 weeks of overnights. Bless. I feel like we lose the Pacific Northwest, though, as we're getting to the video game launch, especially because you have the flight, so you could, show the plane coming in over the redwoods and things like I feel like until we see the arcade later on, I feel like we've completely lost our setting. Like this could have been even to a point where I was like, did they move NCOM? Are we in another city altogether right now? Because nothing read the original setting.
Yeah, and I think because so much of that is shot at night, you lose the landscape. So, and maybe that was done intentionally, but it's a shame that Hollywood isn't Hollywood anymore, but that's just how it is now, folks. Let's talk about the city, though. Having Ares and Athena, and I love that that's what they're named.
We had Zeus in Legacy. It's always the Greek gods.
So I like the consistency there. As I said before, 3D printing and 3D printing them into the world, I love it. Watching the light cycles run in the city.
Yeah.
In the trailer, I didn't really care for it. Actually seeing how it played out, I went, man, this is really cool. And then after a few minutes, I went, man, this is really long. So I'm sort of back and forth on it. I like it. I think it looked cool. but like you could have literally cut this in half and it would have been just as thrilling.
Yeah, it did run a little bit long, but once you realize that they are playing the game, and this is, you know, all of these aerial shots of the city, this is the most that it's ever going to look like the grid. But to see this awesome game played out in real life on the streets, like, it is pretty cool. It took me a while to get on, like, it took me a while to get on board with it. It was after watching the first two back to back where I was like, this is the same game where because it's so long as a chase sequence, and I'm, you know, again, bringing them out of the grid, it makes this an action movie. And I'm like, this isn't just a chase for a chase's sake, even though she's got the jump drive on her. This is the game being played out where they're trying to bump each other off.
Yeah,
in real life.
In a city grid system.
But it took a while to piece that all together, just again, because stylistically, we've made so many changes.
So she cracks the hard drive. She sees that they are starting to lose stability. And then she gets zapped with a particle laser and brought into Dillinger's grid. I was fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
I was fine that was his way of kidnapping her. And the brilliance and where, you know, Evan Peters, we've seen him do this so many times, where he can play charming and he can play terrifying. And this is the first time that I feel like, other than Dahmer, where you see him charming and smarmy, but also with so much evil intent. The fact that he knows she's on my grid now, I can literally just delete her from existence. Nobody will ever find her. They can't trace it back to me, and I'll get what I want. And he tells Ares, I'm sort of paraphrasing, but I think he said the road to the future is paved in blood.
Mm-hmm.
Watching him become unhinged in this moment, it was like, you know what? This is the villain that we need.
Because he yells that line, but for me, what really sells it is when Ares asks him if you de-res her, or he tells him if you de-res her in the game, you will remove her from your world. And he shrugs.
Yeah.
That's what I see. Dahmer, yes, he was incredible as Dahmer, but for me, he's always towed that line between charming and terrifying since Tate in American Horror Story. Like, that's what did it for me. I kind of want to go back and watch season 1 just to see the early marination of this character that he eventually becomes. What I love too is that, you know, and again, we will talk about the performances, but Jared Leto is giving a very subtle performance because, you know, he's in the suit. So there's not a lot that he can do with body language. He has to play it almost robotic to buy that he is still an AI being. But he's so good at just using his eyes and looking like he's thinking. Every conversation that he has with Dillinger, and the more he learns about Eve, it's not just his desire to become human. This is where he started. Like, it's because eventually when he realizes he wants to become human, it's to help her, not for his own selfish purpose. So here we see him start to process what's right and wrong. And he knows right from wrong. That's kind of scary. But starting to learn, you're going to delete someone. That seems wrong. Starting to see that even though he has to obey Dillinger's command, Dillinger is not a good person. He's letting that sink in, and we see him learning and filing it away. But more so than a computer would learn, it's because he's starting to feel. And it's so subtle, but the way that he carries that through his entire character arc, like, it's just absolutely brilliant, this performance.
Yeah, Jared Leto watching him evolve as Ares, and not, you're right, because he's playing it robotically, but just those subtle moments, it's with the eyes, and there are moments where he'll just go,
It's like, noted.
Yeah, and you can just see his wheels are turning. Like, as he builds and builds and builds and builds, and he's talking literally. So he still acts like a program, but he's acting like a program with a moral compass, which, frankly, is sort of what you hope is what happens with AI as the years go on. I mean, yes, it's AI. It's never going to be human, but you hope that maybe AI will have at least some sort of moral compass where it's not used for ill intent. I think this sort of characterization of that gives you hope that that could potentially happen, or it's Skynet. It's one of the two. There's going to be no in between. But I love watching him here. I love watching the wheels turn, and I love that he knows enough to strike a deal.
Yes.
That he thinks for himself to distract Athena, and then admits that he miscalculated it. So even though he's AI and he's advanced intelligence, I like that there's still vulnerability there. So it shows that he's not perfect, but it also shows that Athena is starting to grow. Like, in that moment where he goes, we have 60 seconds, let's strike a deal, and she comes back quicker, and he goes, I miscalculated, we gotta go now. Like, I love what it means for both characters.
I also really love how what he is learning is juxtaposed against what Athena is learning, because right now she's very much obey orders, and she recognizes that he's not going to. And he says definitively, I am fearless, therefore I have power. So you know exactly what he's going to do, that he's going to help Eve. But Athena starts to learn, and she starts to get a little power hungry, I think, because it becomes more than just, I need to obey orders. Like, when she gets named Master Control, there's a little bit of like, good, I got what I wanted in her reaction.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this. I don't necessarily want to call it a jet ski, because yes, it's in the water. I feel like this is the evolution of the, the sailor. They used it in both Tron and Tron Legacy, and we kind of eviscerated those scenes because they tended to drag, because you spent so much time and it's just sailing through the sky and there's not a lot going on. They become very dialogue heavy scenes. So I kind of feel like this is the evolution, because this craft can do anything. It flies, it submerges. It's a great, I hesitate to use the term, but it is a great action sequence. And again, this is where it feels like an action movie, because you're not shooting it grid style, and we are on the grid. So I kind of miss that. But, you know, I kind of have to pick a side here, right? Because we complained that it was slow when it wasn't doing anything, and now we're doing too. Well, I guess that's it. Now we're doing too much, so maybe we could have just found like a happy little medium. But it's a good escape sequence,
right?
And I like that Eve, even though Eve, there's the line when he asks if he can trust her, and she says, "I'd like to think so." She doesn't trust herself, but they kind of realize they're just going to need each other, and they're going to need to go with it.
So they transport out of the grid. They're both 3D printed into the real world. Now, since Eve Kim was human, she has permanence, right? And Ares doesn't. And Dillinger is so arrogant. He could have destroyed Ares right then and there. He has no faith in Ares whatsoever. He has faith in himself. He has faith in Athena. He has faith in what he deems to be patched software, not broken software. And on multiple occasions, he's talked about how broken software is expendable. He's called Ares expendable. So he just lets them go. And his mentality as well, it's my word versus yours. If Eve Kim goes to the police and says, I digitized her and put her in a computer and 3D printed her, is anybody really going to believe it? He doesn't say these things, but you know this is kind of what's going on behind closed doors. I love that he just lets them go and just says, you've got 29 minutes, make the most of it.
Yeah. I also think part of that is that he wants him to wreak a little bit of havoc so that he can show the board what Eris is capable of. Because that's the other thing, right? Like, his mom, she can't control him. They both know that.
Yeah.
You know, like he earned that slap 1,000 times over. She knows she can't control him. He knows that she's never really going to be able to do it. So I think this is also sort of his way of further proving a point of let him run amok in the real world for a little while. This is just only going to make the investors more interested in him. The only thing that I wish, this is the only time that Eve and Dillinger meet face to face in this film. Most of Dillinger's scenes are with Eris. I wish that we had gotten more face to face between, you know, the two prodigies here, really.
We get to NCOM, right? You have this moment en route where Ares is talking to Eve Kim about Depeche Mode, which I love that it's specifically Depeche Mode, something that was so of the Tron time and has become timeless music. But I love that it is that sort of electronica pop. Like, I think that it just works for... I think it works for the environment. And you have them arrive at NCOM with the particle laser because they're going to send him to Flynn's grid to go and retrieve the permanence code. And Athena launches this attack. This whole thing is fantastic.
I absolutely love the car ride. So now at least we get to feel a little bit Pacific Northwest at this point because we're seeing the setting in daylight. So I think that this really grounds the film. I agree with you. Like, of course he would love Depeche Mode. Because it sort of sounds like the original Tron soundtrack. Yeah. I think that because Jared Leto is a super fan, I think he did that on purpose. And he does have producer credit. So there were certain things that he fought for. I think this is all him. And I like that, again, we get to see the humor come out a little bit because he doesn't know really how to explain why he likes the music. He just does. And it's a very literal answer. But what I also love is that because it's AI, he has no social graces. So he's seen all about Eve's life. He's read all of her private text message. And now he's asking her about them. And he doesn't know that, like, this is kind of rude with somebody that you've just met. But it does delve deeper into Eve's character and her motivations and what am I going to do now that I have fulfilled Tess's wish and I have all this power? What am I going to do with it? And he calls her out basically because she was ready to walk away from it.
Yeah. Let's talk about how in the moment where Athena attacks NCOM, you have Ares gets sent to the legacy grid.
Here goes nothing, here goes something.
Yeah.
That was a line from the first one. I like that they did that. Again, I think that's Jared Leto.
So he goes to the legacy grid. But before we get into the actual legacy grid, Athena destroys the particle laser. She knocks Seth out. She goes to kill Eve Kim. And the fire alarm goes off in the building, and the sprinklers go, and she feels the water. It's the same thing that happens with Ares. He feels rain. She feels a sprinkler, and it's this moment where she doesn't comprehend how to feel, and she sort of forgets who she is for a moment, and that leads to de-resolution. I like that as motivated as she is, she's still capable of being distracted, and I like that was something that carried from Ares over to her.
I agree. What do you think about the Flynn's office replica in the middle of the floor here?
Oh, I thought it was fun.
I think it's a fun Easter egg for us. And like, I'll buy it because so many bigger companies, like if you've seen, you know, all of these people that it's not enough just to have a job. They have to be like an influencer and a content creator about it. So, you know, they'll post all of these day in the life vlogs if they work at Google, and they'll show you like how cool the office is and like how there's spaces to sit and like foosball tables or whatever to give you like a mental break during the day if you have to be creative and whatnot. And then it just perpetuates this idea of not actually doing the work because you're showing this to a generation who's never had a job before and they think it's all fun.
And they don't think they need one.
Exactly.
That's why I don't manage anymore.
Sorry, I got up on the soapbox a little bit there. But anyway, I buy that from a bigger corporation where you would have something like this in the middle of the floor. And like they do have all of the old pinball and arcade games because, you know, that's what these modern day companies do. And it's also what companies are trying to do now to entice people to return to office is give them something flashy to play with.
But in this case, it works because it's a throwback to what Flynn was doing.
Exactly. However, we still have the arcade building. Is Sam running that? Like, does he still own and operate that? Does he have any say in that? Is that why he left? Like, did he want to turn away? Like, did they bring that full circle of, I'm not ready to run a Fortune 500 company, but maybe I'll run the arcade, because the building still stands. Everything is untouched except for the office, which you've now taken out and put in MCOM. So if the building still like, why not just leave that there? Why not, you know, if nobody wants to operate it as an arcade, if it's not making money, like why not do tours of Flynn's old place or something like that? I don't know. I think maybe they are, because, you know, and we'll get there once we get to the end of the movie, they are definitely setting up another one. So I think the arcade building will come back into play, but I just wish it was sort of one or the other. I don't know that we need both.
Let's talk about the legacy grid. I love everything about the legacy grid. I love how the way that it's shot feels like the first Tron movie. The way that they wash out the color in Jared Leto's face, It feels like the original Tron movie. How he himself, how his color changes in his armor reflects the original Tron. The fact that he sees the opening in the wall, which was left in the first Tron movie.
Yep.
When they break out of the grid on the light cycles the first time. Like, everything about this, just, it lands.
I love how they bring it full circle. The only thing is that, again, you didn't shoot it the way that you did in the 80s, where you did sort of like the negative, and that's how you get that effect, and you get the light shining through the way that it does. You know, that was all something. That's really what put Steven Lisberger on the map, was because he figured that out in film school, and that style, and he started doing commercials with it, and then that's what he used to eventually make Tron. So this does feel like a modern day interpretation of trying to get that back. I mean, like, they built the set practically, which is great. That's not CGI. They gave Jeff Bridges and Jared Leto the space to play in. So that was all great. It's just the effect on his face. Like, you clearly did that in post. You didn't shoot it in camera that way. But it's also film versus digital, so you can't necessarily recreate that in camera either. But I was so happy to see the old school grid. So happy we get the appearance by Jeff Bridges. To your point, I love that we broke out the same way we did in the first one. And what's interesting is, like, thank God Jared Leto had credit, because he fought to get this in.
Right.
And if we don't have this scene, it's a complete departure.
Yeah.
It's just going to feel, it would have felt too much like a reboot, and that they were just taking Tron as an IP and using it to reboot the franchise. It wouldn't have felt like another sequel.
So while all this is going on, Athena kills Dillinger's mother. And as Dillinger is holding his dying mother, she says, "You did this." I love this scene.
Me too. Because he was never, ever going to learn other than the hard way. But I love this for Athena, too, because this is the perfect example of everything that's wrong with AI. She starts to think on her own, although not really, because the most that she's thinking about is, these were my orders. I'm carrying out orders. You said whatever it took, and that's what I'm doing. You know, I'm paraphrasing. It wasn't exactly whatever it takes, but I think by any means necessary.
Yeah.
So that's what she's following quite literally. And that's the problem. AI thinks, but it doesn't feel. So where Ares is learning right from wrong, she never did. She just took out the obstacle that was in her way. But this was really the only way that Dillinger was ever going to reset his moral compass. Although, did he? Because he's got nothing left now. You know, everybody knows that he's the bad guy in this scenario. He has no more family now. So where else are you going to go? I kind of love that that's where he ends up, is that it's just, there's no more cards left to play. I'm going in.
Yeah. Let's get to the end of the movie here. We get Ares back via the laser in Flynn's old office. He's able to come back to the city. Meanwhile, Encom has successfully hacked into Dillinger's server to start ending the attack that Athena has launched, because nothing can stop her. Eve Kim is just trying to stay alive. The whole thing, if there's one thing about this that I think falls short, I honestly think it's this entire thing.
Me too.
Because everything is so big and so grandiose, and I feel like we rushed this. If you're trying to do the movie under 2 hours, which I'm fine with, there are so many other sequences that you could have cut in half. Why this? This just seems like you rushed.
I think it would also feel a little bit different if there was more human interaction, because all we see is Athena destroying buildings, and it cuts back into Seth and the Encom team in the office to show how they're faring. But you're destroying a city here. We get like one shot of the crowd pulling out their phones and the police creating a barrier. We don't see how this is actually affecting the people that live here. And in a movie that's supposed to have humanity at its core, and that's supposed to be the lesson here, is to not lose our humanity to AI, that's a big missing piece. We should have had more cuts to people running through the street. Or like, are you fearing this? Do you think it's aliens? Do you know where this is coming from? Do you recognize it from the Tron game? Like, we just needed some kind of like crowd POV, or maybe, as much as I hate to rely back on this, some kind of like cut to a news reporter live on the scene giving us the, you know, some kind of crowd perspective, just so that there is some sort of humanity to latch onto here. And I think it would tonally change this entire scene. I think it wouldn't feel like we're crash landing to the end of the film. And I do really think that that's a big piece missing when that is sort of like your central thesis here.
But Ares is able to finish off Athena. She's not coming back. He has the permanence.
I hate the last exchange between them, though. I mean, I like that she de-reses in his arms, but she asked what he's going to do with permanence and what his new directive is. And he goes, I don't know. I guess we'll see. Like, that is some James Cameron dialogue there. We could do so much better.
But off she goes, and Dillinger, knowing the police are in on him, uses his particle laser to pull himself into his grid. So, to your point, he has nothing left, time to go, I have to hide, and it buys me enough time where they're not going to figure out how to get to me. I'm literally off their grid and into mine, and I can bide my time and develop my next move. And that's really all this is about for him. So, into his grid he goes. Off Ares goes to go live a life on his motorcycle, and you see how NCOM ultimately fulfills Tess's purpose, right? Through Eve, which was, yes, we've done the video games, but let's do something to make a lasting impression. Let's use this permanence to build software that betters mankind. Let's use it for medical purposes to cure incurable diseases. Turn it into the trillion-dollar company, though altruistically, whereas Dillinger just wanted to be a trillionaire. I love how we watch all of this play out while Ares is off sort of living his best life and learning what it's like to be permanent.
Agreed. I love how they bring it full circle. I love that we think Eve is back in Alaska, but they've taken Tess's master control, if you will, and put it on top of the NCOM building. I love that we get the orange groves. I love that she not only fulfilled her sister's life's work, but now we get the complete character arc from Eve, because she was hesitant when it came to the AI. And there's that great interview clip of Tess saying, what if the worst thing that comes of AI is benevolence? And we get to see that Eve learned how to use it for good. So she's got the complete arc in her own right, not just about carrying out Tess's wishes. So I think it's a really good ending for this film. It doesn't feel necessarily like the end of a trilogy. This definitely feels like the launch point for where Tron is going to go, because it's not just Dillinger is in the grid now and what is he doing in there. We also see Ares figuring out what his life is going to look like, and then he pulls out the picture of Cora, knowing that there is somebody else out there, although so she's not an AI being that came out of the grid. She's an ISO, which were the humans that were ending up in the grid. So I think this is, and I wouldn't hate it if they're going to do another one. Maybe we do bridge that gap of what happened to Sam.
More on that in a few minutes. Let's talk about our cast here, starting with Jared Leto, who played Ares. He was so phenomenal. He was sheer perfection. I'm going to say something that may not be popular with a lot of people. I'd say he was as good in this as he was in Dallas Buyers Club.
I would agree. I mean, he's an insanely talented human being. I just want to go on record. I've had a crush on him since Urban Legend. Very, very early on in his career, I recognized that he's such a great actor. And I know he gets the bad rap sometimes because he's method and people think that's weird. And sometimes it is. Like as the Joker, he was sending like dead animals and stuff to the rest of the cast. And he was really like leaning into that. And it was off-putting to a lot of people. But he is a great actor. Yeah, I agree with you. It's a very, very subtle performance, but he does so much with it. I don't know that this character is as strong if you didn't cast him.
Greta Lee plays Eve Kim. I thought she was really good in it. I like her chemistry with Jared Leto, because at first I thought this could have been anybody, but by the end of the movie, it's like, no, you needed somebody that could sort of handle this performance because she's not disinterested, but she's not totally invested, and she wants to do it, but she's just as happily not doing it. And I don't think that a less accomplished actress could have carried that.
I agree, because the first couple of times I watched it, I thought she was kind of aloof, and it took a while, but upon a few more viewings, like, I really recognized the depth of this performance. What really impressed me more than anything else, I only just learned that she was in her mid-40s when she did this. So much running. Like, that is a feat in and of itself. Because the physical demand of this role, like, that's the thing. For as much as you are in and out of the grid, and it is about video games, essentially, there was so much physicality that was demanded of this role that we have not seen in any of the other Tron movies. I also really appreciate that they just made this a story about her and her sister. There was no inkling of a romance or feeling, Ares is just trying to learn, or he's learning about friendship. So I'm really glad that they didn't take it in a weird and uncomfortable direction by hitting on any kind of romantic inklings between the two of them.
Evan Peters as Julian Dillinger is absolute perfection, and there's nothing else that needs to be said.
Yeah. The scenes with him and Jared Leto against each other were everything. Just two powerhouses that are experts at what they do. So I loved seeing. I hope they do more things together.
Gillian Anderson plays Elizabeth Dillinger, the mother of Julian. Good to see Gillian Anderson again. You haven't seen her in quite some time, at least I haven't. I bought her with a British accent. I thought that I actually thought she was really good in this. She carried a lot of weight.
She did, because she's clearly had it up to here with her son. She's exhausted, but she knows there is no stopping him, and there's nothing that she can do about it. And you see that. You see her frustration, but I love that it's a restrained performance rather than her like screaming into a pillow over it,
Yeah.
I just wish that there was more on how were you running the company when your brother was on the NCOM board? What happened to your brother? Like
Too many questions.
Yeah, it's a continuity error, but you can sort of forgive it because her performance is so good. And like, that's the other thing. I appreciate that it was a mother and son, and this wasn't another father and son story, because that would have felt like a rehash of Legacy.
Yeah. Jodie Turner-Smith plays Athena. Similar to Jared Leto, watching her develop over the course of the film, she was spectacular. The physicality was great. And watching her evolve but become more sinister. So like she's still feeling, but in a totally different way, and very much mirroring Dillinger. Spectacular.
Yeah, she's great. I mean, she, for not being the big bad, which is Dillinger, she really is, or she really gives the most villainous performance here, and she's great at it with very little dialogue.
Arturo Castro as Seth Flores. He's fantastic. He's phenomenal. His comedic timing is great. The role that they put him in, and like I said, to echo my earlier statement, not just making him the geek. Like, this all works, but I have to pass this over to you because you have an awful lot to say about Arturo Castro.
Wait, We've never told this story on the podcast, I don't think, right?
I don't think we did, and if we did, it was so long ago that it bears repeating.
I don't think that we have, because this was one that like I wanted to take to the grave, but because he's in a Disney movie, and to your point, I'm so glad that thank God somebody recognizes this guy's talent. It's great seeing him here.
Well, no, and from the day that this happened, you were angry from the day that this happened.
I was. So once upon a time, I was producing a short film, and we were casting 3 male leads. So we did an open call, meaning we rented out a studio space. We put up the casting notifications, and it was like 8 hours. It was a full day of having people come in to read. And one of those people was, spoiler alert, you all saw where this was going. It was Arturo Castro. And I remember this specifically because it was just one of those like angel singing, light bulbs going on moments where he walked in the room and he was so nice and so professional. And after you've just been seeing read after read after read, like they all sort of start to sound the same. And I remember he gave such a standout performance because he's just so crazy talented. And I really wanted to cast him. I was like pounding the table for him. He was my favorite. And I'm not just saying this because it's like, oh, look at him now, but he wasn't who the director wanted. And you know, at the time, this was early on in my career, even though I was producing, the director also wrote the story. So it's kind of like you have no say. It was also a male director. I'm a female in my early 20s at this point. Do with that information what you will. I'm not calling him a misogynist, but my word didn't mean anything. But ultimately, it's your film, it's your vision, and if he's not who you wanted, he's not who you wanted. He was like the backup choice. So like if any of the 3 males that they did cast didn't take the part, they were going to put him in as the next choice. So lo and behold, I was working on that project. But then there was also, it was like the next weekend. We did the casting session one weekend. The next weekend, I took another job on a commercial because it was shooting the next town over from us. So it was a lesser credit, but it paid really, really well. And there was no commute into the city. So I was like, okay, awesome. And it was a spec commercial. So in other words, the director was, he was using it basically for his reel to pitch to companies of, oh, I can shoot something like this for your product or whatever. So sure enough, anybody want to guess who walks in that's starring in this commercial? It's Arturo Castro. And I was like, oh my God, this is so awkward because I'm like clearly he recognizes me. I only saw you last week. And now we go from me sitting in the producer's seat to being a production assistant making coffee for the crew. But again, I didn't care. Like, first of all, there's no job too big or too small. You're trying to come up in this industry. Humble yourself. I didn't care about the credit. I cared that like I could sleep in the morning, drive 5 miles as opposed to being on a train for an hour and a half and get paid really well for the day. But when I tell you I saw him and my heart dropped out of my butt, it did. It was just so hard. And I'm like, do I say something? Do I not say something? But because he knows he doesn't have the part at this point. And I was hoping that he doesn't think I'm responsible for that. But like, ultimately, my name is on as producer of this film. Like, he's going to blame me for not getting. So it just would have been so awkward to say something. And I honestly, I avoided him for the whole day, which was probably not the right thing to do either, but it was just so unbearably awkward. And I felt, and like, there's nothing that you can say to bounce back in a situation like this, because anything that I would have said, like, it's patronizing. What was I going to do? Walk up to him and be like, I really wanted to cast you, but the director, like, it's going to look really weak to point the finger at somebody else, even though that was the God's honest truth, was how hard I wanted to fight for him. The true irony here is that I never even ended up completing that film because the director done lost his mind and also hired a male producer while I was still on the project and started like replacing me in front of my very eyes. The whole thing was just a disaster. But in another world, there was a short film where I would have produced it with Arturo Castro in it. But anyway, thank God he bounced back. But every time I see him in something, and he had his own show. It was like a sketch comedy show. He was in Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, which was that was another kicker for me. It's an adaptation of a novel that I really, really love. I'm always happy to see him in things, but to see him in a Disney film. Not that I'm saying being in our short was going to make or break his whole career, but it's just nice to see that he was persistent. He didn't let it get to him, and he's doing so well now.
Well, maybe one day you'll have the opportunity to speak to him again, and you can tell him this story, because you can laugh about it now.
I laugh about it now, but like it, just the awkwardness.
I remember
there's nothing to say.
No,
you can't say anything.
You came home from that casting day, and you were angry. And this Arturo Castro, and I don't say this offensively, he was a nobody at the time. He was as famous as you are. You know what I mean?
That's what I'm saying. When I'm taking a producer gig one week and a PA gig the next day, it's the hustle.
You came home from that casting session so angry. Not depressed, not let down. You were angry that they wouldn't cast him. And I was like, man, that sucks. And then just the look on your face the next week when you said he was there, like it was like a scab that like accidentally got scratched and started bleeding again. Like it wasn't gonna go away. And I remember the Weird Al Yankovic quote unquote biopic, the parody biopic that they did.
Yeah.
Where he was in that playing, I think, wasn't he playing Pablo Escobar? It was like, I think he was playing Escobar in the movie, and he comes on screen and you're like, no! She's like, it's Arturo Castro again!
Haunting my career. No, but I'm happy to see, because that's the thing, like this business is rejection. And I'm not saying like our film was like so big and so important that he would have, it not getting in it would have ended his career. Like, no, that's not what I mean at all. It's just nice to see that he hustled the same way that I was hustling, and the persistence is what got him through, and he's doing just fine now.
He's doing fine. You're doing fine. Everybody's ended up where they're supposed to be, right? So let's talk about where we are, where things are supposed to be, and where things may go as we wrap up our conversation here. Tron Ares, final thoughts. I'm going to take this one and go first. I've decided I'm going to go ahead and take this one, because I've tossed it to you a couple of times, I think. So, I absolutely love this movie. I love it more and more every time I watch it. Is it perfect? No. Out of the 3 Tron movies, does it rank third? Yes. But that's also to say that there's been 3 Tron movies, and none of them have been bad. And maybe because they've taken so much time in between and they've really developed a great story, perhaps there's something to be said for not rushing into a sequel. But there's some give and take with that. I think by not rushing into sequels and by letting so much time go, I think that people sort of lost interest in this. I think you were going to have an animated show that was going to run on Disney Plus, and it was going to be this big thing. And I think they had one on Disney Channel for a while. And then you had Light Cycle Run, which took forever and a day. By the time they got it open, I think people were over it because it took so long to get it built, COVID aside. I feel like by the time this came out, it was almost doomed from the start because I think people were just kind of like, whatever. It is a box office failure, which is a shame because it is such a good movie. Did they leave room to do a fourth? Absolutely. Do I want them to do a fourth? Absolutely. Are they going to do a fourth anytime soon? Absolutely not. Because they've taken forever to do every sequel, so they're certainly not in any rush, but because the movie lost the studio money, it would not surprise me if you just don't see Tron return. Have they left it in a spot where it's a complete story? Yes. Have they left it in a spot where they can pick it up? Yes. Am I happy if they pick it up? Yes. Am I unhappy if they don't pick it up? No. It's sort of in this abyss right now, and I mean that in a good way, where you can go either way and it works. But I don't think we're going to hear from Tron anytime soon.
Yeah, I think you're right. They certainly left a breadcrumb trail and the door wide open for another sequel. Do I think that they're going to do that anytime soon? No, the door is probably closed for now. Or to reference the first one, the door is just going to take a really, really long time to open because it's gigantic when you're breaking into the NCOM building. But here's the thing, though. For as much as we roll our eyes over sequels and remakes, this is just one of those franchises where I'm always going to look the other way because I'll never get enough of Tron. However, I really do want another sequel because of all of the continuity errors and because of what they did leave open. I think you can sort of tie it all back together when we find out what's been going on with Sam and Cora. And that's really the only reason to me that this even feels like a Tron movie, because they finally gave us those things at the end. This is kind of an odd one for me in that it does feel like a standalone. I do feel like it feels more like a reboot than a sequel just because of all these continuity errors. I kind of think that was the intent here, is we want to take this IP that we've got and modernize it. But because of Jeff Bridges being such a legend, we can't just hit reset and do this movie without him. We still have to acknowledge the foundations here. And I think it kind of got caught in the middle of that, because this does not feel like the end of a trilogy. It feels like the beginning of the next phase. And that's sometimes okay. Like what they did with Ant-Man, I had said the same thing, is that Quantum Mania felt more like Kang's intro than it did the end of a trilogy. That's sort of what's happening here. It feels like they're trying to take this in another direction, and you didn't tie up what we've already got in a bow. And that's sort of what I don't like about it. Like I don't love this as part of the Tron franchise. I love it as a cool movie on its own, and I wish that we had like bridged the gap a little bit more, other than the legacy of the companies with NCOM and the Dillinger legacy. I feel like they were sort of just names at this point, and not, they didn't pull enough from the history. So as far as the Tron franchise goes, this is probably my least favorite. I actually, and that's the thing, as much as I love the original, I actually think it's one of those rare ones where I liked the sequel even better story-wise. So since Legacy was such an incredible sequel, and then you took your time and let it breathe again, I was expecting this to be even better than the first two, and it just didn't quite get there for me. But that said, it was still awesome. I still enjoyed it. I still love all of these movies as a whole. This one just fell a little bit short for me.
We want to know what you have to say about Tron Ares. You can let us know on all forms of social media at Monoreel Radio, or you can send us an email, monoreelradio@gmail.com. News of the week is coming up, but first a quick break.
Before we moved to Florida in 2022, Sean and I had been visiting Disney regularly since 2011, back in the days of booking dining reservations 6 months out and paper fast passes. Those were simpler times. Now, the thought of planning a Walt Disney World vacation is completely overwhelming. Between navigating the My Disney Experience app, trying to snag a dining reservation, the ever-changing Lightning Lane system, this process has become so convoluted, and it's only going to get more complicated as Disney expands. Walt said it himself, it's never going to be complete. As your travel advisor, I will take on the stress for you so that you can focus on the magic, those things that made us fall in love with Disney in the first place and keep us coming back. I'm certified by Disney, so my job is to stay on top of all the new information and updates. From planning our own Disney trips and vacations for family and friends, with the combined knowledge of now living locally to the Orlando area, I've been able to navigate every change that Disney has thrown at us over the years, and I'm happy to share my expertise. Yours complimentary when you book your trip with me. Visit monoreelradio.com/travel to get started planning.
Miley Cyrus is getting ready to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Hannah Montana with a anniversary show dropping on Disney Plus on March 24th. It's called the Hannah Montana 20th Anniversary Special. If there is nothing in this world that screams cash grab more than this, I don't know what does. She spent years doing shocking things to separate herself from her Disney persona. She didn't care what she did as long as nobody looked at her like Hannah Montana. Now, maybe part of this is she is getting older. She is an accomplished artist. She doesn't need to be shocking anymore, but my God, does this just scream cash grab.
You might say, though, Sean, that now she's got the best of both worlds. She's had a career apart from Disney, so now she can look back and embrace it. No, I hear what you're saying, but like they all did it. Britney did it. Christina did it. They tried to, Sabrina Carpenter's doing it now. Everybody's trying to shirk the Disney image and say, hey, I've grown up. And it's, 9 times out of 10, they're going to do that by using their sexuality to create the distinction, which is awkward and uncomfortable for the people that grew up on it. But I also think, part of it is hindsight is 2020. You could make the same argument, though not doing it as shock value. Look at what they're doing at Pod Meets World now. They tried so hard immediately after Boy Meets World ended to do other things and become known outside of their characters. And now they've come full circle and they can look back on it with a fondness and realize, you know what, there's a reason that people loved this so much. And they're embracing the past instead of running from it. And I think that you can only do that once you've had enough time to separate yourself. It's very different. I mean, yes, they all grew up on a Disney show, but like Danielle Fishel's not trying to change her image as a pop star. I think it's different when you were known as Hannah Montana and then had tried to have a singing career outside of that, but you still had that attached to you. Do I appreciate the 180 that she did? No, not really, but I sort of understand it. But I think the only thing that was going to make her look back on Hannah Montana with a softer gaze was time and distance from it.
2 major trailer drops this week. Starting with The Mandalorian and Grogu, which is going to hit theaters on May 22nd of this year. This trailer has me so excited. I've said that I think we're going to look back on The Mandalorian and say that potentially was the greatest show in television history. I wish that it had continued as a television show. I understand why they spun it off as a film, because Star Wars doesn't know what it is right now. This is the only thing that seems to be working, and money. So I get it. I think this is unfortunately likely the end of this story. Perhaps you just spin off and do something with Grogu. So it's a bittersweet pill for me to swallow, but I'm so excited by this trailer.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely going to have to do a rewatch, which I should probably start now to be ready to prep for it, because it looks great. And I think that'll be the nice thing about it, is if you haven't watched the TV series, you could probably just appreciate it as a standalone, as part of the Star Wars universe. I just personally want the refresher, but just based on what the trailer looks like, I think it's going to have less to do with the series and more to do with Star Wars as a whole.
You've got 3 months. If you've never seen it, you've got 3 months. That's more than enough time to knock out The Mandalorian and then tag on the Book of Boba Fett, frankly. And because we've learned absolutely nothing, less than a month later, on June 19th, Toy Story 5 is coming out. We got the trailer dropped this week for a film that, in my opinion, still shouldn't be coming out, because we shouldn't have had Toy Story 4. However, if you're going to talk about something that, for better or for worse, has become timeless outside of Toy Story as a franchise, screen time and the brain rot that is tablets with kids, the fact that they're hitting on this makes all the sense in the world.
I think waiting and making a movie that's a social commentary on technology was a very smart choice. But the other thing about this trailer is the nostalgia factor. I think Disney and Pixar looked at all the people, ourselves included, who were hating on Toy Story 4 and went, shut up. This is such a good trailer. It tells us everything we need to know about the plot. It gives us the characters that we know and love. I actually think this one is going to be really great, to a point where my hope for it is that we walk out of that theater and we're like, you know what? I'll accept Toy Story 4 because this one was just so great and we needed 4 to get to 5. To your point, though, you know, yes, we have a May and a June release, but this is nothing new. There's always a big Memorial Day weekend release. There's always a big end of school release in June, and then a 4th of July release that follows it immediately. The difference, you know, we talked about it, you know, I think this is timely because we're finishing up our slate of all these 2025 theatrical releases that took us 2 months to get through because there were so many of them. The difference is when you have these big blockbuster movies that come on these big weekends, they're all coming from the same studio now. Or every studio has to have a big release instead of like Disney having one on Memorial Day and Universal having one on 4th of July. And that, like, it gave people a chance to spread their money out and actually get to the theaters to see these things. But now you have every studio trying to do every one of those big weekends. And these are not even the first 2 big ones of the year. Pixar's Hopper is coming out next month in March. So already now you've got, it's like a 2-to-1 ratio for the first half of the year.
Pixar that looks like DreamWorks, by the way. I've never said that on the show, but
it does.
It looks like DreamWorks.
It does. I still want to go see it, though.
Let's talk about Epcot's International Flower and Garden Festival starting on March the 4th. The festival flavors foodie guide was released this week, and we're going to talk about some of the new offerings that are coming to this year's festival. Starting with Brunch Cot. They have French toast.
The French toast.
High on the list.
CT Crunch sprinkled on top of there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I saw that and I immediately thought of you. I was like, okay, we will be in line for Brunch Cot for sure.
There is a tuna poke bowl going to Nectar, hosted by Advent Health, which I'm sure is something that you are going to be all over.
You wait on your line, I'll wait on mine.
We have a Mickey-shaped lemon violet macaroon from Sunshine Seasons.
I'm just not a lemon fan. It looks really nice. I'm sure if you like lemon, it looks really refreshing. I'm just not a lemon person.
For the spring flavor of it all, I'm sort of interested, but I personally cannot stand when people make food that tastes and smells like cleaning solution. It's like when lavender was the big thing forever. Like, no. Lavender, that's in Lysol. I don't want to put lavender in my mouth.
Maybe skip the panna cotta then.
Okay, I haven't gotten that far. Yeah, sorry folks, I'm about to embarrass myself. Chilaquiles con carne. I'm not Spanish. I'm sorry. I didn't do well when I took it in junior high school or high school, and I'm failing at it again. Interesting looking a dish over at Jardín de Fiestas. And then you have the Frozen Island Escape, which is new also at Nectar, hosted by Advent Health. The cocktail and the dish look very interesting.
Yeah, I definitely want to try both of those.
And then you've got ceviche over at La Isla Fresca. Again, that makes sense. I like that they're doing things that seasonally make sense.
Mm-hmm.
That you're not doing, hot soup in July, which they've been known to do, or changing the schedule so that you have something that can accommodate the time of year. I like that they're doing something that looks like it's going to run all year this year.
Yes.
Then you've got the garden vegetable flatbread over at Trowel and Trellis, which has been sort of a favorite of ours. That booth is sneaky good.
It really is. No, and that flatbread, it looks no different. Like that looks like it's going to be one of our festival favorites. Even though it's veg, it looks really hearty. I actually do want to try that one.
You've got the honeycomb bowl over at the Honey Bistro, hosted by the National Honey Board. That's another booth that typically is very good. Coconut panna cotta over at the Nectar booth. This looks banging. This looks fantastic this year.
I thought that was lavender because it's purple. I thought there was lavender in it.
No, it says coconut panna cotta. That's all it says.
No, it does look really good. I didn't think you were going to want to try it because, like I said, I thought that was a lavender one. It's just purple, but it looks really pretty. It looks really good. And I'm not, again, I'm a bad Italian. I'm not really a panna cotta person, but I would try that.
I'm excited for the Flower and Garden Festival. I'm interested to see exactly how everything goes, because those who have been with us for a long time know that of the festivals at Epcot, it kind of does fall towards the bottom of our list. And as far as food goes, see, this is what has me excited. Even the stuff that I know I'm not going to eat because it's not my flavor profile, I'm impressed with what they're doing, because the food specifically at the Flower and Garden Festival, and I know it's the Flower and Garden Festival, so it's not the Foodie Festival. However, the International Festival of the Arts isn't a foodie festival, and that food is phenomenal every year. The fact that it looks like they've really taken to improving the culinary experience, I give Disney a lot of credit for this.
Agreed. They've really diversified the menu, and we're supposed to be getting new topiaries this year too. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Yes, well, thank you all so much for joining us this and every week on Monoreel Radio. Monoreel Radio will always be free, but there are many ways that you can support the show. Please give us a rating wherever you listen to podcasts. Join the conversation on social media at Monoreel Radio on all major platforms. Share your favorite episodes with family and friends who may enjoy them. And of course, book your next trip with Jackie. Links to everything can be found at monoreelradio.com. We all get one story. Make yours a magical one.
On behalf of Monoreel Radio, we'd like to thank you for joining us. We'll see you at the movies, the stuff dreams are made of.